This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, and happy June. Despite when you're listening, today is the first Friday of June, and really excited. We have got a head teacher coming to talk to us on a very positive subject today, all around how we can create a really inclusive and happy, positive school environment. Morning, Tom, I can see is listening in. Morning, Marie. Morning to everyone who's joining me live. But if you're listening back, welcome to you as well today. We've got lots of questions that I want to ask Paul, who will be joining us shortly. But if you have any questions, and if you're listening live between 11 and 12, do feel free to pop them on the chat, and we can certainly try and ask as many questions as we can to Paul if there is time. I have got a lot of my own though. So hopefully, I think this is Paul just joining us. Morning, Marie, saying hello in the chat. And I guess it's quite nice to know we're going to be having a very positive conversation today, all around how we can create a positive and happy school environment. Just while we wait for Paul Brown to join us, if you don't follow his school already, you will find them on Twitter, Brandscore School, because some of the things Paul's talking about with us today, you might be able to see on their feed. They've got lots of lovely photographs of the things the children have been doing. One thing that I think is really interesting about Paul's school, and I'm sure he'll talk more with us about that later, is kind of what values a school holds dearly. And one thing that I think is really nice about Paul and his school is that their core value is to be a loving school. And I think that just really sums up really what schools should do and what education is about. It should be about that kindness, that support. And so that's definitely something I want to ask Paul more about today. How can you have, how do you fulfill that value of having a loving school, and what does that look like day to day? So let me just see if I can invite Paul to join us this morning. Hopefully no technical issues. So sit back and relax for the next hour with me.
This program has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health program will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
So, just waiting for our guest to join us. And hopefully he'll be here very soon. Welcome to everyone listening. See, we've got lots and lots of people listening live this morning. So hopefully technology won't disappoint us. It's been a really nice week for me, working with my students this week. One of my students got something published, which is really exciting. She's currently a teaching assistant in a school. So really nice to see that, even as a student, as someone who's training to be a teacher, the world is your oyster. You've all got an important voice to share. So think about ways that you can share that. The article was on Fusion magazine, and my student was called Natasha, and a really interesting article about how we can support children. I won't give it all away. You'll have to jump onto Fusion Mag and have a read. Apologies for the delay, just waiting for our guests to join us this morning. I know last time one of my guests had a few issues joining, so thanks for your patience. If anyone does have any questions in the meantime, do feel free to ask them. I just feel like Friday morning is such a nice time to have a guest, but also my brain's slightly half asleep. Not sure how everyone else is feeling. Hopefully for any teachers listening, you've had a really good half-term break. It's always really nice to see teachers on their social media sharing the things that they're doing in their half term. Really nice to see people making the most of having that extra time to yourself, and hopefully you've done something nice for you, so you're feeling restored and refreshed. I was speaking to teacher Matt last week, and his school has 2 weeks for half term. So if any of you listening also have 2 weeks off, that just sounds wonderful, and hopefully lots of nice things planned for your second week next week. I'm just going to hopefully have head teacher Paul Brown join us in a minute. talking about how we create a positive and inclusive space in our schools. I wonder if any teachers listening, if you've got any top tips for having a positive and inclusive space, if you want to share them. And yeah, maybe we can see what Paul does in his school to promote that inclusive and safe space. Let's enjoy the news and our 2-minute tech while we wait for our guests to join us. And I can't wait to see. I always enjoy the 2-minute tech feature, seeing what new thing I can learn. So sit back and relax while we enjoy the news.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.confident.com.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The debate around immigration took a turn towards education this week as the UK government announced that foreign postgraduate students on non-research courses will no longer be able to bring family members to the UK. According to the BBC, the University of Wolverhampton has already criticised the new plan. Whilst Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said the move would help bring migration down, Dr. Rachel Morgan-Guthrie from the university said students who came with a support network were more likely to succeed. Last year, 135,788 visas were granted to dependents of foreign students, nearly 9 times more than in 2019. In the same period, 680,000 foreign students studied in the UK. There was also division within the government as some wanted to see the ban on dependents extended to all postgraduate students, whilst others, including Education Secretary Gillian Keegan, argued that there were economic benefits both to universities themselves and the wider community. Vapes have regularly appeared as a topic of concern for many teachers, and a recent report into substances found in illegal vapes is likely to raise further issues. The BBC reports that vapes confiscated from school pupils contained high levels of lead, nickel and chromium. The results of the test showed that children using them could be inhaling twice the safe limit of lead and 9 times the safe amount of nickel. High levels of lead exposure can affect the central nervous system and brain development. The majority of the vapes analysed were deemed illegal and had not been tested before being sold in the UK. So-called highlighter vapes, designed in bright colours to look like highlighter pens, contained unsafe levels of the metals coming from the e-liquid. The government has allocated £3 million to tackle the sale of illegal vapes, but critics say it is not enough to deal with concerns around the number of children gaining access to these products. In Scotland, school meal debt could be scrapped in some additional areas after North Ayrshire Council agreed an action to investigate the impact the debt was having on families and schools. Head teachers of local schools are regularly reminding parents they owe money, according to the story in the Daily Record. 12 councils across Scotland have already abolished this type of debt. The increase in families struggling with paying for meals has been attributed to the cost of living crisis. Many schools have reported parents struggling to feed children and resorting to sending pupils to school with inadequate packed lunches or, in extreme circumstances, keeping children off school to avoid accruing more debt. Finally, and staying with the topic of food, STV reports that in Glasgow, free school meals have been so popular that head teachers have had to stagger lunchtimes to ensure everyone can eat comfortably. The increased uptake of children in P1 to P5 accessing a free meal has again been attributed to the cost of living crisis, meaning more families are needing to access certain benefits. But at least everyone is getting a good meal, and the staggered breaks have helped kitchens and dining halls to cope. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2-Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I'm considering how easy it is to get distracted when researching on the internet. I'm putting myself in the shoes of a young person and have set myself the task of writing a report on the greatest invention of all time. I'm also not going to use ChatGPT. So, my first online search shows a lot of people claim the wheel is the greatest invention, and let's face it, there are a lot of them around. There are 9 million bicycles in Beijing, and that's a fact. That's 18 million wheels just on bikes in one city, if we assume nobody has a tricycle. This led me to want to know how many bicycles there are in the world. The answer I found was an estimated 1 billion. That's 2 billion wheels, again assuming nobody has a tricycle. Now I want to know how many wheels are there in the world. Another search tells me there's an estimated 37 billion, 24 of these billion being toys, and the next biggest share of 8.4 billion being on cars. A quick the results page poses an additional question I hadn't considered. Are there more doors or wheels in the world? Well, I simply have to know. In a few clicks, I find out it's estimated there are 48 billion doors in the world. So based on this research, there are more doors, and isn't a door a great invention? Yet it's not been proposed as one in my prior searches. And if there are that many doors, how many hinges must there be? The amazing thing about the internet is that there's always an answer, and the way search engines deliver those answers are designed to keep you interested and active. So potentially you see more ads and make them more money, which doesn't help get that report written, does it? Does your school teach young people how to research effectively? Do our young people realise how much they are advertised at? I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, why not get in touch at TC Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Well, welcome back with me, Poppy Gibson, here on the Friday morning break. I can't believe that the 2 Minute Tech thing has put the doors and wheels conversation back in mind, because I'd finally forgotten about that query. Are there more doors or wheels? I'm still not sure that that is totally right, but apparently it's doors. So if anyone else ever got involved in that debate last year, apparently it's doors. But let's move on, because I said it's going to be a positive conversation today. And hopefully we've got our guest here with us, Paul Brown. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Poppy. How are you?
Yay! Good morning. Much happier now you're here.
Yeah, well, I'm much happier as well. I was having a proper meltdown at this end there, and I've no idea why I'm called such a bizarre name on this thing either, but I can't manage to work out how to change it, so I'm going to leave it alone in case I disappear again.
Absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine. It's just great that you're here, Paul. I'm so happy you could give us some of your half term, so we really appreciate you joining us.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
So, Paul, I've written a whole list of questions for you, if that's okay. And I know today our theme is kind of talking about positive school culture, but I thought maybe before we jump in with the questions, and I know we've got lots of listeners listening live as well who might ask questions, maybe could you please tell us a bit about you, about your own background, your own educational journey? Is that okay, Paul?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
So I'm sort of coming, I guess, towards the latter end of my education career, sort of into my 50s now. I've been a head teacher for 21 years, coming up 22 years.
Wow! Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Well, yeah, it is amazing, really. I look back on it and think, how have I managed that? But anyway, I've been a head teacher in 3 different schools in that time, and before, I've taught for 30 years, mainly up in the Lake District. I was really lucky in teaching up there, and Cumbria. I trained up there as well as a teacher, which was amazing, right into the Ambleside, in a teacher training college up there, which was amazing. It's gone now, sadly. And always been a big advocate for outdoor learning, sort of experiential learning, that sort of thing. Did a lot of work in central London in challenging schools, Tower Hamlets and places like that, Bethnal Green, to see if the same principles could be applied to those sorts of schools that weren't as privileged in their spaces and stuff, which was really challenging but really exciting. And then I had my first headship was in a really quite small school with only 4-5 classes. And that was quite challenging. And then after that, became the head of a school that had been put in special measures. That was a big challenge, but an amazing staff team there that taught me so much about teamwork and what it means to
Wow.
how important a good ethos is. And we got out of special measures in 9 months at that school, which was amazing.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, we got a good, which was amazing. And that was a big that was probably one of the highlights, really, to see that school turn around, because they were such great people and deserved
in just
it.
9 months as well, Paul.
Yeah, that was, well, it was nothing to do with me. That was just with me asking them what they thought. They're the experts in the school. I'd only just arrived, so I just asked them what they thought we needed to do, and then I facilitated that to happen. And so, yeah, it was all down to an amazing staff, really, who just needed to be heard, which was fantastic. And and then I moved down south. Then I'm now at Branscore School. Been there 10 years this year, and yeah, I moved just for change of scenery, to be by the beach and lovely weather, and it's amazing. It's a great place to be a head teacher in the middle of the New Forest, which is incredible.
Wow!
So I feel
Gosh,
very blessed.
I was going to say, you've lived and taught in some really nice parts of England.
Yeah, I'm a lucky boy. Obviously, I'm originally from Liverpool, and my intention was always to go back to Liverpool and to teach there, and I never did. I never have, because I took a job in my last teaching practice school. So in those days, I thought having a job's a great idea. So as soon as I was offered one, I took it, and I didn't really look back. I've loved every minute of my teaching career. I love being a teacher. So.
Love that. So maybe one day you might trade the beach for the banks of the Mersey, or no?
Yeah, well, you never know. I think I might be going all the way down to go all the way back up again. You never know. Maybe you don't know what the future holds, Paul.
You
do not. No.
Wow, amazing! What a journey, and it sounds like you enjoy a challenge.
Yeah, I love a challenge. Yeah, that's what keeps you going, isn't it? If you don't feel challenged and excited by what you're doing, you probably should be doing something else, I think. And obviously, there's nothing much more challenging than school leadership, I don't think, and in fact, teaching in general. Really, I've got nothing but admiration for colleagues that I work with, and that goes right down to teaching assistants and people that support the school, in cleaners and the support staff, and admin teams, and it's just it really is a truism that it takes a village to raise a child, and that's so true. And I feel very privileged.
That's lovely.
There's a lot of negativity around being a teacher these days, and you can get a bit swept away with all that. And I think actually the fundamentals of the job are still massively rewarding. It'd be nice to have a better environment to work in, but I wouldn't change it. Wouldn't change what I do.
Love that. I can see why your schools have always been so productive and positive, Paul, with you at the helm. What a lovely, and like you say, everyone matters in a school, don't they? We're all part of our school family, or even if you're in college or university, you all need to work together and communicate, and that's the way you get the results, isn't it?
Absolutely, and making people feel seen, and making people see that their role within the organisation is important and valued is critical, I think. And all of those people, don't forget, come into contact with the young people that you're teaching. So if they're disillusioned, they'll pass that on to the children. So it's really important that your dinner staff and your midday supervisors and your teaching assistants and everybody feels they're part of something bigger.
Yeah, I love that. All working together with the same vision and values. That's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Okay, so I feel like this is set up perfectly for the first question I've written for you, Paul. It was seamless. So I guess the first thing I just really wanted to ask then, I know you've shared all those amazing places you've worked. In your experience, how do we create a positive school culture? And I know you've given us some handy hints there about valuing everyone, but for anyone listening, really, how do we do that?
I think probably the first thing that I would say is to try to be really clear about what you value as a school leader or as a teacher. If you're thinking about it in the classroom environment, think about what's really important to you, what you think will move. You've got to look at it through the lens of the community that you serve. So what would be the ideal culture for my school wouldn't necessarily be the ideal culture for a school in central London or in Middlesbrough or the remote Scottish Islands or something. You've got to look at the community that you serve, because that's where you should be coming from. It's a job of service, really. It's a job of support, and it should be the hub of any community. I think a school, a place, the most trusted place really for people to go and to be. And so I guess to create a positive school culture, you've got to start with the assumption that everybody there has the best of intentions. I think people sometimes go in looking for the negative. Actually, I've supported a lot of schools in challenging circumstances. I've done a lot of, NLE type work where I've gone into schools that are struggling with leadership or headship or whatever, or haven't got ahead, and I've had a bad Ofsted or whatever, challenging Ofsted outcomes and stuff. And what you tend to find is that I've never been in a school where people had overall poor intentions for the children or the learners in their care. Most people want the best and do their best. Sometimes that can be slightly misguided, and or might be quite disparate in the way that they're approaching it, and that needs pulling together then. So I think one of the big things is to make the assumption that most of the people you're going to be working with have the best of intentions and are doing their best. And if they're doing something wrong, it's probably not deliberately the case. So assume the best in people, assume they're there for the best. And that will mean that now and again you get taken for a bit of a ride or a bit of a mug. But I'm happy for that. I'm happy for that to happen, because for every one person that does that to you, there'll be 10 people who appreciate you noticing them and appreciating them and assuming the best of them. And so you still get, on balance, a much better outcome, and a much more loyal and supportive staff team. I also think that you've got to then share that, and it's got to filter down. It's got to filter down to the children. You've got to role model what you want, and I think the vision and the values have to be really, really clear. Not many of them either. That's why, our school's just got one, which is to be a loving school, and that's it. And so we talk a lot around that. And whilst it sounds very simple, it's actually quite complex, because you've got to think about, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? How do we live that out in the way that adults speak to each other and interact? How do we show that through the way we plan activities for our learners? And how do we engage our parents in that? And to be, to create an environment which is both compassionate, consistent, very open and transparent, really clear about what you want to do and what your intentions are. And then to make sure parents understand that as well. So it's got to be really clear, and it can't be too much couched in educational jargon, I don't think. And above all things, be a person. At the heart of it, we're human organisations, so humanity is really important. Being vulnerable and prepared to be wrong is also important. And model those things. So model that you're a learner too. Model, get your staff to model good learning, challenging each other, but then challenging in the right ways. And I think that fosters positivity amongst people if they feel valued and heard and seen. And then that whole idea of challenge through, because, one of the things that we'll say is, because we love you and care about you, we're not going to accept that behaviour from you, or we're not going to accept that poor standard of learning from you, or whatever. And children understand that, and I think that's really important. Really, is just to make sure that you're really open and transparent and clear about what you want and what your values are.
Amazing. I think you're right. It's about those fair and consistent boundaries, isn't it? And I like the way you use that word, consistency. I think when children know what to expect, that's when they feel comfortable, isn't it? They, if the school's got this fair, consistent approach and everyone's on board with, how things are being done, then children are going to be more comfortable knowing what to expect. So, wow, I think I've written down so many amazing points already from that, Paul. Thank you.
Sorry, waffling on. Sorry.
No, that's the best kind of radio guest. we don't any, virtual tumbleweeds rattling around the studio. So, no, that's amazing, and I can see that, after, did you say it was 20 years as ahead?
Yeah, just over 20 years. Yeah.
20 years is ahead. So yeah, amazing, to think the people that you've had that impact on, and the pupils, that's had an impact on, through that cascade of love and support. And I love that idea of, your school being a loving school, but like you say, it's more complex than it sounds. It can't all be hugs and rainbows. So I guess my next question then, off the back of that, how do we get that balance right between kind of the challenge and support, do you think?
Well, I guess it's a little bit like what's that Peter Drucker quote about culture eats strategy for breakfast, isn't it? That one that, you know, culture is the all important thing, but I'm not absolutely certain that that's totally accurate, because I think if you've got a really good culture but no real strategy at all, then you just end up with a lovely place to be, but not necessarily enough direction. But if you've only got strategy and no culture, then you're the opposite. You're not going to be followed. Nothing's going to work. People are going to go off in different directions, and so I do think there's a balance between those two things. And I think when you can't really challenge people authentically unless you're happy to model being challenged yourself. And I think if you can model being a good listener and valuing people, being able to offer, if you're going to challenge someone, then offer them the support that you think they need. So I like Kim Scott's work on radical candor, where you talk about you care personally, but you'll challenge directly. So being really open and transparent about caring about the person, thinking about the person, saying how are you, how's things, trying to know more about them, understanding their circumstances, so that you can then challenge appropriately and at the right time. Because sometimes people really don't pick the right time to challenge somebody. And I think that's really important. And good school leaders pick their moment and then say what they need to say, and don't get bogged down too much in sort of, I think Kim Scott calls it ruinous empathy, where it's, the message gets lost in sort of sympathizing with people a bit too much, rather than saying, look, I care about you, you're really important to our organization, care about you as a person, I see you as a human being, but we've got this thing that does need to be addressed. And I think, these are how can I help you to address them? Is there any more I could be doing? And so, people knowing that they're valued allows you to support them and challenge them.
That's excellent. Wise words there, Paul. Thank you. So kind of taking what you said there, and back to one of the first things you said on the show today, like obviously what works for one school might not work for others, but equally, I guess, what works for one child doesn't always work for others. So I guess my next question I'd like to ask you then, how might school leaders account for the wide-ranging needs of our learners that we have in our schools these days? Have you kind of got any advice or tips for how we can make sure, we do have that inclusive approach, taking into account how, the diverse range of needs in our classrooms?
I really like all the latest things around, I don't think the latest thing is always the thing. I think you've got to be really careful with the latest thing. I think initiative overload can be terrible, and vacillating between one strategy and another strategy, and one approach and another approach is probably one of the most dangerous things for education. But stick to what works. But I do think the work around adaptive teaching at the moment, and being more in the moment with learners, is really, really important. Thinking about Rosenshine's work, what Mark Rowland says about relational teaching and feedback. Feedback in the moment, I think, is really important, and being prepared to shift and change what you're doing. And if you think about the two sort of pillars, or the two tracks that really need to go together in a school, if you're going to take a relational approach, which I think is really, I like a relational approach. I think it works. I think it's authentic and it's effective. So if you're going to have a relational sort of policies around behaviour and such like, then you've also got to extend that into the classroom and how the children are being set tasks and they're learning. So if you're saying to children, on one hand, outside the classroom, I see you as an individual, I recognise you, I value you as an individual. Like, we have something called a VIP scheme that recognises every child once a whole week every year, sees them as a person, and we celebrate them just for who they are. They don't earn it, they just are it. So they could have had the worst week possible the week before, and then they just get a VIP week. They're picked at random, and we celebrate them for a week. They wear a red jumper instead of a blue school jumper.
Oh, wow.
It's got a little gold VIP on it, and they...
Oh, wow, that's so cute.
And we celebrate them, and we say, it's amazing you're here, and we talk about why school would be less, why we would be diminished as a group if you weren't here. And we talk about different jigsaw pieces all being different, and the jigsaw doesn't work if two pieces are the same. But also a jigsaw doesn't look right if one piece is missing. So you've got to belong, and your shape is the perfect shape for that whole in our school. And so we talk about all those sort of things. If you're going to say that to children outside of the classroom and value them and see them as people and individuals, then within the classroom, what you're teaching them has got to be adapted to their needs and their abilities. And so you've got to be looking and thinking, right, the teacher can adapt a plan and differentiate, or whatever you want to call it, and say, right, these are the activities I'm going to do for these children in my classroom. But actually really great teaching now is, doing that assessment on the hoof, looking, doing your live marking and saying, right, okay, guys, you're actually moving on much faster than I thought. I think we need to change what we were going to do. You guys moving a little bit more slowly. We need to help explain that a bit more clearly. And, teaching is that really, and I think if you get that right, and it's really hard to get right, by the way, I'm making it sound very simplistic, but I really do think some of the adaptive approaches that are being talked about online and demonstrated nowadays could be really exciting moving forward, as long as you keep it fairly simple, and you do need to know your children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, such good advice. It does all come down to how well we know our learners, doesn't it?
It really does.
And it's all tied in with what you're saying, though. So when you make people feel valued, they're more likely to open up, and communicate with you, and you get to know all of them, not just their academic side. So
yeah, and Poppy, is it so wrong to say to a child or a learner in your classroom, do you know what? I'm really sorry. I've given you the wrong work today. This is too easy for you. Or I think this, maybe this is a little bit too challenging just now. We need to just take one step back and it's nice for a child to think, oh, actually, it wasn't all down to me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it also shows how you're in it together, doesn't it? If you're saying to them like, oh, it's not quite right, it's showing that, you're all in that learning boat together, I guess. And yeah, I love that. And just for anyone who's just joined us, I see we've just got some new listeners come on. We're talking to Paul Brown, from the head teacher from Branscore School, and he's just thrown out an amazing idea about VIP jumpers. I feel like I need to get these for university. I love this.
Absolutely, I agree.
Did the staff have a VIP jumper as well, or is it just
we did ask the staff about it, and they absolutely vehemently did not want them at the time. So we might revisit that at some point in the future. I know, I think they're miserable. I told them exactly that. I said, you're just too miserable. You've got to be going with this.
But it sounds so snazzy, like a red jumper with gold VIP. Maybe it's because you make them feel like VIPs all the time, Paul. Maybe they don't need a jumper.
I'm sure that's what it is. But we do things for the staff. We have a shout out board in the staff room where we just put out little thank yous on heart-shaped post-it notes and say, thanks so much for covering my lesson yesterday, or whatever. Thanks, you did a great job at running sports day, or thanks to Lynn for hoovering the carpets, or whatever. So sorry we made such a mess with the clay. That's usually what
Oh, I love that. Oh, it's really nice. So many good tips and tricks here.
Another thing, to affirm an email or a card from a parent or thank you or anything like that, we stick them all up, because when you're having a tough old day and you get in the staff room, you can have a look at it and think, actually, yeah, we're making a difference. We're doing stuff. It's all working really. When the bigger picture comes back to you, then you think, yeah, we're moving in the right direction.
Oh, I love that. The wall of love. Yeah, I think so many teachers I talk to, we easily focus on the negatives and, the stressful parts of the job, but there are all these amazing glimmers of magic, aren't there, in teaching? And I think Absolutely. What I love is how at your school you're displaying them, like you're not afraid to be like, these are the great things about the school community, and celebrating them. That's so important. We forget that sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Right. Wow. Well, we've covered 3 questions in about half an hour.
Yeah,
I'm not sure I'm going to get through all my list, but no, I love it. So it's so interesting. Let me have a look at my list, what I'm going to pick up next. Okay. Actually, I've written something for you. As a head, I've heard of the myth of the super teacher or the super head. And as you've been a head in 3 schools, I wonder whether you can talk to me a bit about what you think that means.
I guess what you see is, I remember in my day when I first started teaching, which was way before any sort of social media, you got the odd person who'd get on the teaching practice bus, and you'd be exhausted from doing a day's work and you think, oh, that didn't go so well and this didn't go so well or whatever, and you feel a bit dejected about how you've got on and what could have done differently, and reflecting on all that, and then someone would jump on the bus after you with a box full of stuff going, oh, I've had the best day, it was amazing, I did this and I did that and the kids all love me, and I'd be sitting there like wanting to zip my coat up over my head, hiding a ball, thinking, why are they so brilliant at this and I really struggle. And actually, that's been magnified so many times more by social media. And I'm not saying social media is a bad thing, but I am saying treat it with care, and look at it with a skeptical eye sometimes, because if you were to look on, I don't know, but any social media really, you will see the most incredible displays, people saying this is, my class are this and they're that, and I do this amazing thing and that amazing thing. And I'm quite sure they do, these teachers and head teachers do these amazing things. But actually stand back a little bit and say, well, we're all good at some stuff, but we're all struggling with other things. And it isn't perfect in their world. And you're just seeing the shiny side of the apple. The other side's rotten or bitten away or whatever. And it's really important to just remember that we're all struggling, we're all trying, we're all doing our best, and we all sometimes don't get it right. And sometimes we get the impression from the media or whatever that there's a super head who's going to come and sort it all out. Remember the London Challenge schools who had these amazing, very well paid super heads who came in and had them fired and sacked and sorted, and actually lots of those schools have gone backwards now. Some of them haven't. And I wouldn't be able. I'm not an expert enough to say which have and which haven't. But there is a real risk in putting everything on the persona or the character of somebody. It can't be about just one person. So you might be a fantastic teacher in your own classroom, but if you're being a maverick and not working with the rest of the school team, and your classroom looks very different from everyone else's, you're creating that within school variation, which you need to be sharing that good practice or following the school's policies. And I know that sounds really boring actually to some people, but actually being creative within the school's boundaries and policies and so we're all doing the same things in the same way and it's consistent for children is much better. So being part of a team, I think, is far more important. A great team player, sharing. It's not about individual glory. This job, it's never been. It's about being the best part of the team you can be, and the better you are at that, the better you'll be. So you don't have to be a superhero. Superheroes tend to leave a wake of destruction behind them wherever they go. And that's not what we want. What we want is steady, solid, really creative people working together, because the parts when put together are greater, and the whole then becomes something more powerful. So in terms of behavior or anything else, be part of the team. Don't try and stand out just for yourself. Don't try and lose that ego a bit, is what I'm saying, I guess. And you can be misled by looking at social media and thinking everyone's a better head teacher, school leader, teacher than you are, and it just isn't true.
Oh, such good advice. Thank you, Paul. And for any leaders or aspiring leaders listening, really good advice about being part of the team, even though you're the head of the school, being part of the team. I love that. The next question I wanted to ask you, Paul, is something a little bit different, but still linked. I wonder how important you think parents are when it comes to developing this positive school culture. I know you've spoken about valuing everyone in the school, but what kind of part do parents play in your school?
Well, I think, in all the schools that I've ever been in, I always feel parents are so massively underrated as a resource. It amazes me really that these parents, sometimes you do have to take a step back and just look and think what's going on. Some schools are quite frightened of parents. They're scared to let them in. They're scared to get them involved. My question's always been, you're only ever as good as a school, never mind Ofsted, you're only as good as parents say you are. And so it's really, really important for schools to help parents to understand their vision, their values, be really clear and transparent in that, and then show parents what you mean. Because let them in, show them things. We get them, loads of them in on a Friday for VIP worship, for example, and we try and show them exactly what we mean by being a VIP in our school. What does that mean? What the values we're putting on forward in their children, trying to trying to develop in their children. And I think, if you can get parents on side, they are such powerful advocates for your school. They have so many talents and skills to offer, things, expertise in other fields that you might not have as a school. And I think it's really, really important, and if you take one little step back there and look at a parent and think this parent's being unreasonable or whatever, this is why we can't let them any closer to school. Actually, when you look a bit closer, you think actually they're trusting us with the most precious thing that has ever been in their lives. Their children are if you said to any parent, what would you choose, your house or your child? It would take them less than a nanosecond to tell you which that is. And what they're saying is, I'm going to take this most precious thing that's ever been created in my life, and I'm going to take them and give them to a whole group of strangers for 6 hours a day and hope for the best. And that is a massive act of trust and vulnerability from a parent. And so to then diminish that, so parents are sometimes a little bit unreasonable or perhaps a little bit worried or a little bit anxious, and we should acknowledge that and see it and then work from there. And if you get that right, if you show parents that your school is a safe place, it's a loving place, it's a place where your child's going to be nurtured and appreciated, and also shown the right things to do in terms of behaviour, learning behaviours, teach them how to be the right sort of person, and giving them opportunity to take responsibility. Parents love to see what goes on and will be powerful advocates for your school.
I love that. And I'd actually never thought about it in that way, Paul. They're trusting us with their most precious, the most precious thing in their life. I'd never really thought about that. And
for us, it's just, sometimes we forget and we say, it's just a job. You just rock up on Monday, don't you? And you start teaching again and on you go for another week. But actually, some parents will find it really difficult, unless they know what's happening in that classroom. It's like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, we're all looking out through the gates, but we don't know what goes on in there, And it's really important to be really transparent and show parents, these are our expectations. This is how we manage behaviour. Parents are very quick to use the bullying word, aren't they? And so it's really important to say, it's not bullying. This is what we do. Come and have a look at a playtime. Come and see what we do at lunch times. Come and see, a maths lesson or whatever. And it is vulnerable. It's a way of putting yourself in a vulnerable position as a school.
Would you actually let a parent come and see a playtime, Paul?
Absolutely.
What?
Yeah, why not? Why not?
How would that work?
Well, come and have a look. If it would be informal, they would come in. They'd say, would you mind? They'd have to make an appointment to come, but they're very welcome to come and have a look if they're worried.
Wow.
And we also let them come and watch the children play if they want to. There's nothing to hide. It's a safe place. So.
Wow, I love that. Wow, I might have to move my children to your school. I'd love to come and see what goes on.
The thing is, children will tell stories, and when parents start to worry about their children, they start to direct the narrative to the negative. So they'll say, what went wrong at school today?
Mm-hmm.
And then the child goes, oh, mum needs an answer about what went wrong. I better think of something. And instead, it's much better for parents. We talk an awful lot to parents about saying, look, you're the really vital cog in this. Even if you're worried about us, even if you think we're doing something we shouldn't be doing or we're doing it wrong for your child, please don't share that in front of your children. Please give the impression that you've got 100% faith and trust in our school. Because if you do that, your child will have 100% faith and trust in our school. If you talk to them, or if you overshare with them, or you talk over their heads to your partner about worries and anxieties you've got about the way school's doing something, they will hear it and they will have worries and anxieties about the way we're doing things. And you need to create an impression that school is a great place to go. It's a really happy place, a place where you can feel safe, and it's a place where you're going to learn and you're going to be your best. And even if you don't believe that as a parent, challenge the school in the right way without the child knowing too much about that.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Brilliant advice there for how we can support parents to help us develop our positive school culture. So for everyone just joining, we're just talking to head teacher Paul here about creating a positive school culture. So I guess my next question then, kind of lead on from that, is then how can individual teachers contribute to this school culture then, Paul? What kind of role do they have in your school?
I think the big thing is being, it's up to the school leadership team to be really clear about their vision and values and show that and demonstrate that to the staff, and then say, and this is how our behaviour policy or our relational policy is going to be, and this is how we would like you to take that forward. You know, once the senior leadership team has made decisions about how behaviour is going to be managed, how planning is going to be done, you know, how parents are going to be engaged, all those things, how the lessons are going to look and the timetables are going to look, then it's up to then the phase team leaders or however you structure your school to then give that out to the staff and say to them all, how does that look for you, and make sure that that's really clear, and then keep revisiting that so that the staff really understand what they're supposed to be modelling, how they're supposed to be doing it, you know, giving them maybe some scripted conversations to help them to make sure that they're telling people in the right way. Newer staff that are coming in need to have a mentor or somebody to support them, a buddy to support them, even if they're not new staff. You know, if they're experienced staff, they need somebody alongside them who knows the school or is more familiar with the school, who can say, look, this is what we mean by that, this is what that would look like in practice, and model it to them and show them and get alongside them and be there, you know, to coach. And, you know, we're big on coaching. We do very little formal lesson observation. We do much more about developmental coaching. So coaching each other, supporting your colleagues, and then all getting behind the same messages and the same vision and values and living that out and challenging each other when we're not. And that's what an individual teacher should be doing. You know, things like, it's okay to have a little grumble in the staff room. That's absolutely what you should be doing. But if it starts to become corrosive gossip and unkindness, then I would expect some of my staff to say, I think it's probably better if you go and talk to them directly about that. You know, because if you allow a culture to get sucked into that vortex of corrosive sort of gossiping and backstabbing, it's pretty soon undermines the whole school, really, and so it's really important to sort of challenge that fairly directly. And teachers, you know, stay on message, follow the policies, be part of the team. That's the big bit really for teachers, is just play your part within your phase team and then the wider school team, and try as best you can to stay. I know it sounds a bit corporate, doesn't it? Because I don't like the idea of corporate schools, and it makes me very nervous, but being united behind a set of values is really important, and modelling that.
Definitely. Yeah, really good advice there, Paul. Thank you. So, yeah, I suppose that's right. We're all individuals, but part of this bigger thing, aren't we? It's important having your own identity, but also being part of the school's identity. And I think, yeah, for me, I could really see, because I think I worked in 6 primary schools when I was a teacher. Wow. And I could really see those where, you know, I was totally supporting the school's values, and it just felt a better place for me to work. Whereas when I, you know, worked in other schools where I didn't quite, you know, agree with their behaviour management policy and marking policy, which all fed into that bigger vision, I didn't stay in those schools so long.
and you know, Poppy, I think that's right. You know, it doesn't necessarily even mean that they're bad schools. It just means that for you as a person, that those vision, those values, or the way that school wants them to be applied doesn't suit, doesn't feel comfortable, it doesn't feel the right fit, and so they may well be very effective schools, but it's just not the right school for you as a teacher. And you know, I've felt that before in schools where I've thought, you know, I've gone to support in schools and thought, blimey, I'm not sure I could have taught here. You know, and I think that's fine, really. You know, we are all different and we all have different values, and you know, some schools suit us and some schools don't.
Yeah, really, really good point there. And to all so now I teach at university level, you know, the next generation of teachers, and I always say to them, remember there are thousands of schools out there, you know, don't be afraid to try more than one. And I think particularly for new teachers, you know, ECTs and NQTs who start in one school and then, you know, think you have to stay. I mean, I stayed in my first school for 4 years and then I just felt ready to move on. So I think for anyone listening as well, maybe if you're, you know, falling a bit out of love with things at the moment in your work, like just remember there are other schools, you know, other teaching jobs in other places. And yeah, I think it's important that you're a good fit for the school and the school's a good fit for you, isn't it?
Absolutely. And a change is as good as a rest sometimes. Sometimes it starts off really well, you know, you're really positive and everything, and then for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to fit quite so well, or you sort of fall out of love with the approaches being taken or whatever, and you can challenge that, in a professional way. But if that still isn't something that it still doesn't sit well with you, yeah, absolutely think about maybe it's time to move on. Maybe it's time to look somewhere else.
Exactly. Great advice there, Paul. So we've got 10 minutes left. I'm hoping we can do 2 more questions. What do you think?
I don't know. Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's go for it. So 2 very different questions. The first one, and I know you've given us lots of sprinkles of advice through this interview today, but what for any kind of new heads or aspiring heads, what are your key observations or advice to these new leaders after 21 years of your own school leadership?
I think the biggest thing that when I work on MPQ programs, I do the MPQH for 3 different providers, and I think one of the things I would say there is that develop your own vision, do a lot of reading, do a lot of listening to podcasts, decide what feels comfortable for you and what doesn't. Once you establish what you think is vitally important and what you think a school should be and how it should serve the community in which it's placed, then decide on a core set of very simple principles and values and try your very best to then think, okay, that's what I believe. What would that look like in the day-to-day life of a school? So what would I be seeing in the corridors? What would I see on the playground? What would the parents be doing? What would the staff be doing? What would the cleaner be doing? Try and see that in your head, almost write it out, draw it out, whatever you want. Describe it to yourself, and then talk with the senior leadership team in that school about how different that might look to what is the current situation in that school, especially if you're a new head to a school. Don't just go in and make wholesale changes, because actually there might be 50% or 70% of what you aspire to be already in place. And you don't have to make your mark by just throwing out really good things that are already there. Make your mark by changing the stuff that needs to be changed.
Fantastic advice there. Thank you so much, Paul. Change what needs to be changed. And back to your earlier thing you said, I really like, don't be a maverick.
No, don't just... Well, the trouble is with mavericks, they're great. It's great to have a couple of sort of maverick teachers who are willing to take a risk. I'm not saying that. Do dangerous learning, do learning that's going to be at the edge of children's, zone of proximal development. Make sure that children are really engaged and excited by what you're doing with them. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying don't be exciting in your teaching, but do it within the values and the vision and the policies of the school, so that you can be supported as a school teacher. You want to feel like the school could get behind you if something went wrong, but also there's a shared togetherness about what we believe. In our school, we're a loving school, so we would expect you to not shout at children, for example. Don't do that. Do this instead. And so if teachers were then in their own classrooms thinking, well, I know a better way of doing this, I'm going to humiliate, shout at children and belittle them and be sarcastic and whatever, I would have to say something about that, because that's not following the policies that we want in our school. And that might be okay in some way. Well, I wouldn't think it is. It's abusive. But, there are things that you could do that we would not approve of that would still be perfectly fine in a school, but we wouldn't want you to do them at our school. And so, yes, you can be an exciting, innovative, teacher, but do be part of the whole, I guess.
Amazing advice there, Paul. Thank you. So I'm hoping I can tap into your advice just one more time, please, with my last question.
I don't know whether my wells have still got anything left in them. I feel like I've just repeated myself on over and over.
No, it's been so useful. So that was really good to hear, kind of advice for those new heads. What about someone who's right at the start of that journey? Someone who maybe they just finishing their teacher training, they're looking forward to September for starting their very first day with their own class. I don't know if you can remember back to your very first class, Paul.
I absolutely can. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about them, then I'll ask my question.
Well, I remember after the first day, when I first started teaching, it was chalkboards. So I had a blackboard with chalk. I didn't have a whiteboard of any sort, let alone one with fancy pens, and definitely not one that you could touch and it was a computer. Goodness me, no, none of that. This was proper blackboard that used to roll round. Do you remember them? The rolling around blackboards.
Yes, I remember. I loved them. They were so squeaky.
Yeah. So I had one of them in my classroom. I remember the very first day after having my class, and I remember it was a really sunny day outside, and I just remember the chalk. The kids had all gone home, and I was sitting on the desk and thought, wow, I've got through a day as a real teacher. And all the chalk was just falling really slowly in the sunlight towards the floor, you know. And I just remember it being almost in slow motion, and it was an amazing feeling to actually feel that you had your own group of children and you had your own learners, and it was up to you now for a year to take responsibility. And, you know, if you go back to what I said about parents and the trust that they place in schools to look after and care for their children and educate them in a way that they would approve of, what that responsibility can lie really heavy on newly qualified ECT teachers, and the you know, going back to that idea, the myth of the super teacher, you know, looking online and seeing other people doing these amazing displays and having time to do their marking in a fancy way and doing all these incredible things, it can very quickly intimidate you and give you that imposter syndrome. You know, I'm not as good as all this. I'm never going to be getting away with this. And actually, my advice to them would be, you will be doing just great. Just stick in and ask for advice from friendly members of staff who are interested in your development, your progress. Do lots of reading around subjects that you think, you know, being really reflective is the big thing. I think when you're a younger teacher is saying, you know, not being too hard on yourself, but saying what went really well today, and write down some stuff that went really well, and then ask yourself, well, why did that go so well? Why was that so great? And then, you know, one thing today that wasn't so brilliant, what could I have done differently there? And if you're not sure, talk to someone else. You know, talk to a more experienced member of staff and say, I'm thinking this, I'm not sure. What do you think? I think there's a real risk in less experienced, not necessarily younger, less experienced teachers newer to the profession, watching really experienced teachers. You know, I think Tom Bennett says something about, you know, you wouldn't go and watch Darcy Bussell at the Royal Ballet and then go, right, I've seen somebody doing ballet, I can do that next week. I'll crack on. You know, that's not the way to learn to be a ballerina or a ballet star of some sort. The way to do it is hard graft and learning as you go along. And I think I would subscribe to that is, you know, talk to staff about what are you doing, how are you doing that. You know, maybe getting somebody alongside you to coach you sometimes through lessons if you're worried. And being vulnerable and open enough to that. And, you know, that's what really strong learners do. You know, don't feel you have to be the finished article in week one or year one, or in fact, decade one, because we never are. And I'm absolutely not there by any means. Every day I go into school and I think, oh yeah, I could have done that instead. That would have been a much better idea. You know, every day's a school day, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the best teachers are learners themselves as well, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I think being really open with your children about that as well in your class is really important. You know, oh, I've done that wrong, haven't I? What have I done wrong there? Oh my goodness. You know,
love that.
Being really open and really vulnerable is a real strength. You know, but you have to be a strong person to do that, don't you?
So good. Yeah, just role model life, like just role model what it is to be human.
Absolutely.
And you actually have answered my question, which was, what would your advice be? But some really good advice there that you've offered out. I think that the social media one is a biggie. Like I always say to my students, join social media, you know, get on all the good social medias, get on all the groups, the teachers, you know, hashtags and groups, but use them for inspiration, not as a comparison, because I think, you know, just like as anything on social media, like you said earlier, they show the shiny side of the apple. You can't see all the, you know, the rubbish piled on the kitchen worktop, you know, next to that cake or whatever. So I think
exactly.
Don't think your classroom needs to look perfect to be a positive learning space, because that's not the case. I mean, my classroom used to be a bit chaotic at times, but what matters is the learning and the progress and the support and the love in the room, isn't it? Not how tidy my desk is. I mean, hopefully the students didn't mind.
Well, but it's absolutely true, isn't it? You know, learning is messy, and as long as there's, you know, organised chaos, you're probably fine. And you know, if that seems to like it's overwhelming, you talk to people about systems, you know, and strategies you can take. But I agree, you know, the best classrooms are usually busy classrooms, and children are getting on with stuff and being independent, and that does mean that they're not always the tidiest. You know, learning walls aren't always the tidiest, are they? Proper working walls that are used and applied well are not necessarily things of beauty, but they are really useful and worthwhile.
So good. And just I'll end with just a very quick horror story. Thinking about, you know, we've mentioned find the right school for you. I remember once my children were doing an activity in their classroom. I think they were doing some kind of group activity, all chatting away. I think I was in year 4 or 5. So, you know, lots of, you know, big children with big voices. And I just remember one of the school leaders at the time, won't name any names or schools, but the school leader stuck their head in through my door, just threw my door open, stuck their head in. They were like, gosh, what's all this noise going on in here? And I just remember like literally shriveling, like, you know, they were having really good peer learning. They were obviously enthused and excited. And I just remember just feeling like, oh, all my power is just being sucked away by that comment. And I think as well, that's really hard. Sometimes we do have leaders that aren't so supportive. It can feel really damaging and toxic sometimes. So it's great to hear there are heads like you out there, Paul.
I think there's a really good thing about that. I can't remember who made the quote, but that it's a fairly old quote, but it's engagement is a poor proxy for learning. So, you know, classrooms where you go in and you see children sitting quietly at their work and seemingly engaged, or classrooms that look very busy, neither of those things suggest that the children might be learning anything at all. What you need to do is look at what they're doing, question them really well, ask about what's going on, assess that as you're going along, and then you'll know whether it's engagement or not. You know, being engaged, whether it's learning or not, engagement doesn't necessarily mean children are learning. So your children there would have probably been learning really well, and it's a real shame when somebody can just stick their head through a door, see something, and make a snap judgment like that. I would never do that. I think seek to understand is one of the most important things a school leader can do.
Yeah. Wow, more words of wisdom right in the final seconds of the show, Paul. Oh, you're so wise. You made me want to get back into school now and make a change. Thank you so much, Paul. That does actually bring us to the end of our show here on Teachers Talk Radio. But I just want to say a huge thank you, Paul, for giving up some of your half term to come and talk to us today.
You're very welcome. I'm going to the beach in a minute.
Wow, amazing. Wow, you've earned it after giving us all your wisdom. I hope that the sun stays out for you and you have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
All right, take care, Paul. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us and see you again next time. Take care.
Bye,
Bye, Paul. Bye.